My strongest memory of Brendon McCullum as captain is him flying through the air, usually trying to stop some near meaningless boundary. Not once, but again and again, head first, flying over the padded triangle, right towards the sponsor board with no sense of fear for his own well-being. But before that, McCullum did a similar thing with his batting. It had this reckless energy to it that at the time didn't really make that much sense. But like the best attacking batters, it made everyone bowling to him feel uneasy. As a spectator, you had to watch. He was as spectacular in success as he was in failure. And bowlers are the attackers in tests. So McCullum flipped that, as the best strikers often do. But more often, the danger was really the threat of McCullum rather than the reality of him. His actual strike rate was at the boom boom end, but it wasn't always full on explosive like Sehwag or Gilchrist. But McCullum showed us that he was all in, and he helped mould a New Zealand cricket culture that was in danger of splitting due to T20, and he gave them a new identity as their off-field competence grew. He was probably given too much credit, but how could you not praise him? The man was flying. Jonny Bairstow has 200 scored at better than a run a ball in Test cricket. They're both from the last 2 weeks. Under McCullum, his strike rate is raised 3 points in 3 tests, and it's not even those 2 matches that he went for. If you look back at Lords, he made 16 from 15, playing a couple of shots per ball. It just didn't happen to work in that one. But it is clear that England have unchained Bairstow. And we do know what a free Bairstow is like. There is a Yuvraj Singhish ping off Bairstow's bat when he's in full flight, like he's using a stick made of something more magical than just English willow. In ODI cricket, he had to battle just to get into England's team. He was an afterthought. Yet this is him compared to the other ODI players during his career. Buttler is faster, Bubba and Virat are more consistent, and AB is just better. But Bairstow is hanging with the best players, averaging nearly 50 while striking out more than a run a ball. If his career continues like this in ODIs, then he's quite clearly one of the greatest of all time. And he's obviously pretty good at the IPL. It took him a long time to get there, and then he exploded his first year. Then he had 2 poorish seasons before 2 solid ones. I wouldn't say he's been an out-and-out star, but he's at the right end here with a very good record. And then look at him at tests. These are the guys with more than 3,000 runs in his era. And we've shown you him twice at the good end. And now he's way down the bottom. It probably says a lot about England that he and Stokes are so low. And he was a keeper for a lot of this. But he actually averages more with the gloves on. And of course, he's had bad treatment that led to a lot of this. If England wanted to ruin a player like him, one with incredible talent but also fragility, they nailed their execution. And you might be thinking that Bairstow is just a white ball talent, which is why it hasn't translated consistently in test matches. But he's been a gun for Yorkshire, averaging 50 over his career and having periods where he completely dominated. And again, he did this as a wicketkeeper. Bairstow could certainly play the red ball, and we had seen flashes of it before, but now we're seeing an explosion of it. And while the phrase BazBall is quite new, this is the second incarnation of it. The original was clearly in New Zealand, where he took the captaincy, fairly aggressively, from Ross Taylor. In the previous 4 years, the Kiwis had won 6 test matches and lost 15. With him in charge, their record was 11-11. Of course, many things changed, like the fact they assembled their greatest ever seen bowling lineup. But batting-wise, they were also quite a bit faster. Their runs per over were 3.4, good enough to be the second quickest side in the world. And you can see that most teams were hanging around 3, so this was pretty fast. And it was quite a leap from 4 years prior. And it wasn't just the batting, was it? It was fields, changing plans, getting the players to commit. BazBall was a lifestyle choice. And McCullum was just as happy to boost up BJ Watling blocking as he was looking for players to smack it around. It was about intent, invention and commitment. But he does trust attacking players more than most because that is his people. However, backing white ball batters without consistent runs in first class cricket rarely works. David Warner is often pointed to, but he was different. He actually hadn't played much red ball cricket. And when he did, there were runs. Of recent times, we have seen Jason Roy, Alex Hales, Joss Buttler and Aaron Finch. All those players were averaging mid-30s or lower in first-class cricket. Roy, Hales and Finch all played domestically in the middle order, but they were given new roles at test level based on their white ball form. And none of them made it work. Perhaps Buttler was the closest. And that's because he was in the same role that he had been in first class. On top of that, he came back as a specialist number 7 bat, which is about the comfiest position in cricket. And of course now McCullum thinks he can rehabilitate him. Weirdly, if anyone was well versed in how this could go wrong, it should be McCullum. His opening bat was Martin Guptill, who is actually a more striking example than the others. Guptill has 7,000 ODI runs, averaging over 40 with a strike rate of just under 90. The man destroys white balls. And he's not even a bad domestic red ball player. Whether it be county cricket or back home in the Plunket Shield, he's always had a good red ball career. Yet these are the specialist batters who made over 500 runs while McCullum was captain. And here's Guptill right at the back. It's not even close. He was just terrible. And while he was a slightly better cricketer than this over his entire career, Martin Guptill never averaged over 30 in Test cricket. So if a player of this quality can struggle, it does show you how hard it is to take a guy who smashes the white ball around and make it a thing in tests. The red balls move laterally off the seam, they swing longer and stay harder. The pitches are also not made purely for runs, they start greener, foot marks and cracks play a part, and the surface degrades. The same basic skills are needed for both, but they are different enough that it will not work for everyone. However, in this series, it's noticeable that while England has chased well, the balls have become soft, and the wickets haven't degraded that much. Add in New Zealand's injuries and occasionally wacky bowling selections, and things have been in England's favour a lot. They might be trying to change how cricket is played, but they're also doing so with the breeze at their back. That doesn't mean England isn't going to change how the game is played, or at the very least, how they play it, because this already looks better than folding for under 150 every game. Before England were crashing, they might as well try flying first. And maybe Test cricket does need a refresh. Not just England, but everywhere. Despite all the logical reasons teams don't play in tests like white ball cricket, so many people ask if they should just try it. And there's no doubt with analytics and money that many sports are changing. As a player of Madden video games and occasional watcher of NFL matches when I was younger, I never understood why teams ran the ball so much. For one, players never got that far. And two, it seemed that the same players were used repeatedly, meaning that they would get worn out. They'd give these players huge contracts and then run them till they couldn't run. But I didn't know anything about the NFL, so I figured the sport's first billion-dollar baby knew something I didn't. But since the year 2000, teams have thrown the ball a lot more. So now I wonder if they were just stuck in an old way of looking at the game and protecting the ball. Because as they've started to throw it more, they've started to gain more yards per play. And it's changed the sport. Like the fact that people started calling the NFL basketball on grass. This was because when the quarterback started throwing the ball in the air more, coupled with extra spacing and non-stop movement, it meant the sport was more like basketball with its one-on-one action and crazy cross-court running. Of course, basketball had its own revolution. When the league was merged with the old ABA, that led to the three-point line, which had a slow start, but then over the years, you know what started to happen? Teams worked out that 3 points were worth more than 2. This was a risk worth taking, but the players had to adapt as well. This little blip in the middle was when they moved the line closer, but you can see almost every year there are more three-pointers shot in basketball. And there are patterns in Test cricket as well. If you look at runs per 12 over and the average of each wicket, they spent 30 years following each other pretty closely. That was until ODI cricket began to be taken more seriously and Australia inspired some faster scoring. Weirdly, instead of averages going down, they went up, and the scoring rate now is still historically high, even if it's had a little slide. But my favourite year is 2018, when the pace-playing pandemic starts, and no one is making any runs, but teams are still scoring quickly. Since 2001, the only years under 36 runs per 12 overs is 2021. There are only 2 years before the year 2001 where 10 tests were played and that mark was broken, 1982 and 1921. Now it's almost every year. So as we often see in modern sports when the scoring has got faster, it usually means it's with more risks. That means that there's more variance between your results. So sometimes it works and you fly, and sometimes it crashes and you burn. And there's a really interesting thing to look at when you look at fourth innings chases. Before 2017, in less than 5% of fourth innings did a team successfully chase 250 plus. And you might be thinking, well, that happens all the time now, thanks to the last 2 weeks plus Ben Stokes and Kusal Mendes. In fact, people have been predicting this trend for a long time due to how teams chase in white ball cricket. But finally, it has actually now started to happen. Since 2017, it's more than 6% of the time teams are chasing over 250. And it was starting to happen even more frequently before England did it thrice in a month. But they are clearly taking it to a new level. So chases are easier now. However, that's happening at the very same time in one of the biggest batting slumps we've ever had. So Test cricket has come to this. Teams are scoring less, but chasing better. I mean, that is modern cricket. Because we have seen teams continually to score quick even when they lose wickets. A chase of 250 no longer feels like that much, even if a score of 250 is towards the higher end right now. And that's because of what Stokes, Mendes and Bairstow have done. All they need to do is come off for a session, even half a session, and the chase can be over. Welcome to the chase and collapse era. It's also worth remembering that while it feels like England have been terrible for a long time, that isn't quite true. England weren't the world's best team from 2013 onwards. They fell off when Strauss, Trott, KP, Pryor and Swan all left. That is a lot of talent to lose. They also went to a different model, one that involved a lot of all-rounders. The top order they tried to fix with every able body around, but the lower middle was a real strength for them. They had the highest average and best strike rate between 2013 and the beginning of 2018 when you look at batters from 6 to 8. Only India were anywhere near them, and Australia are way down here. This fell apart when the Butler experiment ruined Bairstow, Stokes had to go up the order, Woakes couldn't take wickets overseas, and Moeen's batting slipped before retirement. Also, as the top order got worse, these middle order guys were in too early, too often. But at its best, the combination of Bairstow, Stokes and Moeen were incredible. Stokes was freed up to bat at 6 and have a smaller workload and more of a break after bowling. Bairstow at 7 meant he was playing the older ball, and Moeen had the freedom to swing away at number 8. These are 3 players with all-round skills, so there was less pressure on their batting, and they made a lot of runs in this period. All of them had quite decent averages for their positions as well. England played entertaining and inconsistent cricket in this time. Now, Moeen Ali might not come back, but if he does, you could bat him at number 7 now, and let him hit how he sees fit. But they can actually replicate this somewhat by having Stokes at 6 and Bairstow at 7. If they wanted to, they could add Harry Brook at 5, who is another attacking player, though his first-class record is a bit shaky. Or they could have Butler at 7, but as a specialist batter, and let Bairstow come in at 5 as a keeper, if he's happy to do so. But for that to work, they still need something to happen at the top. Kumar Sangakkara suggested Joss Butler for that, and I don't think that would work, but it would be lots of fun. The top is worth discussing though. The most apparent impact of BazBall seems to be Bairstow and Stokes, but Alex Lees is quite interesting. It looked like he would never make any runs in the West Indies, and he still managed to do that quite slowly. He has been far quicker here in England. Striking at 50 isn't massive, but it's a quick step up for him. Lees has had a weird career. He started in 2010, but got proper playing time in 2013, and then starred as a young batter. In the middle of his career, he starts to drop off. These are some truly awful years. And that's when he moves to Durham and starts to bat really defensive. You can see that he kept scoring at the same rate until he rebuilt his game, and at that time he also finds some form. Now maybe he needed to slow down and make more runs. Still, it's more likely that there was a natural slowdown when he changed his technique, and the positive mindset he always had was replaced because this new way was working. And who knows why he's batting quicker now. But it does feel like a Baz bump. Most former players, when you talk to them, don't think England's new method will last. I think there's an element of luck there. And the way New Zealand's played, that's probably fair. But Kumar Sangakkara talked with excitement at what England and McCullum were doing. The idea as he saw it was to get batters back to how they played when they were young, when they dominated cricket. We've certainly seen Stokes bat like that. It's as if he's at an under-14 game where his main objective is to make people run off the ground and cry. But to see Lees attack more, that is really interesting. During the peak of McCullum's batting, there was a thought that he would change cricket forever. It was only a few former players, but they mentioned how McCullum could take the slips out of play. And being that is where most top order players are dismissed, that's quite an achievement. Think of it like the recent England off-stump method, but with added slogging. What McCullum really did in the end was something related to that, but not quite the same. He basically followed Mike Tyson's belief that everyone has a plan until they hit them out. McCullum was down the wicket, outside leg, hitting sixes and all over the place. Bowling to Baz in this form was like bowling to the Tassie Devil. Think about this as if you're a test bowler. You have your main plan, say back of a length outside off, or full at the stumps. Then you have your main line and length to default to if that doesn't work. And there's always a second and third option to each player, and you can also adapt to the pitch or what the ball is doing. These are the normal bowling habits when you have a red ball in your hand. But Baz made those plans explode when he's running at you or backing away. And because he can score at 10 and over, or even more, that speed gets in your head because once McCullum is flying, it is not easy to stop. And even when you get him out, there's an aftertaste that lingers. That is what Bairstow and Stokes have done in their chases. And New Zealand has been unable to curtail them bowling in a usual manner because England is not playing our usual game. And then the Kiwis have been a bit too slow to move into white ball methods. The thing is that England probably prefer them to do that anyway. England's batting in ODI cricket, like the West Indies in T20, changed batting. And while the last evolution in Test cricket was probably Australia's 4 and over ideal in the 90s, that was before batting changed. The bats, the batters, the mindset, the training, and the shots. And I didn't show you this before, but I've done a podcast on it. 2017 was the first time that ODI averages started consistently being higher than tests. Over the last few years, ODI batters have made more runs, just as the red ball guys have, well, stopped making many at all. So why not use that to your advantage? McCullum was trying to change batting in tests from the middle, but he might actually have more of an impact from the boundary. Think about what has happened with Neil Wagner and Joe Root in their third test. Wagner was setting up for a wide one on the drive. He had packed the offside, and this was a tactic that a lot of us who've been watching them play thought the Kiwis should have tried more in the previous two tests. The commentator said that he just needed to be patient and that Root would chase one. They were right, but when Root chased it, there was no driving bat that could be edged because he was reverse scooping, and the field was not set for that. I mean, why would it be? Root picked up a 6, and there was huge risk in his shot, but weirdly, perhaps not that much more than a normal cover drive. And that one shot meant that New Zealand had to find a new plan. That's what England are doing. And because they have all those white ball shots, it's very hard to slow them down. So what does this look like in real terms? There have been 7,602 test innings of more than 50 overs, and only 40 times have a team scored higher than 4.8 runs and over. It's just a hard thing to maintain in a test match. They are mostly modern day tests, with only 8 before the year 2000. And you'll see that I've marked out a few notable events here. This one is when McCullum made 145 off 79. This is when he took 195 from 134. Over here we have his runnable 100. And this one down the bottom is his double ton from 188 deliveries. But my favourite is this one. It's from Leeds in 2016, right at the end of McCullum's career, where he made 41 from 28. And his team still carried on for a fast scoring innings. But the really cool one is the following knock, where McCullum makes 55 from 98. And it's everyone else in his team who becomes him. This was the height of BazBall in the UK. He had absolutely won the English over by the time he did this in tests. If they rolled his ashes into a joint, English cricket would have collectively smoked them. But there is more to enjoy here, because I have another colour highlighted. These 3 at the front are from this series. Bairstow was involved in all 3, and Stokes just the one. But there's also the Cape Town in 2016. Outside of that Cape Town one, you could argue that McCullum has had a hand in almost a quarter of all the fastest scoring innings of all time. When you think of everything that happened with New Zealand, it's quite clear that McCullum was pushing them towards this kind of cricket, usually on his own. But now you look at English cricket, and he's got a lot of guys who can hit the ball to play with. I mean, these guys could already fly. In fact, if you look at their ODI records compared to McCullum, Stokes hits at the same rate, but from the middle overs with a better average. Bairstow beats Baz easily with average and strike rate. And obviously, if you want, and England might, you could add Butler. And they have others. England have access to Moeen, who smashes it. The next batter in this test team is Harry Brook, who has a strike rate of 150 in T20 cricket. They also have Liam Livingstone. And none of these players are McCullum. He was a man unlike any others. But in England right now, he has some of the most attacking players in the world. Guys who have changed ODI cricket forever by scoring it more than a run a ball, and quite a few big scoring IPL seasons between them as well. English cricket over the last few years has not always been good, but they have been consistently innovative, for better and worse. And they seem very keen to try something new. And right now they have a man who they believe in more than he does himself. And a whole squad of hitters who like to smash the hell out of the ball. It seems like McCullum's plan is just to let them fly. And all we can do is sit back and see if this experiment works or if they crash. When he played, McCullum was a player you had to watch every ball of. So far as a coach, he's the exact same thing. Welcome to BazBall.